Melissa's eyelids drooped as she squinted at the endless stretch of asphalt ahead. The monotonous hum of tires on pavement had long since faded into white noise, punctuated only by the occasional rattle from her beat-up Honda Civic. She'd been driving for what felt like days, though her phone, when it still had reception, told her it had only been about 8 hours since she'd left Albuquerque. "Come on, baby," she muttered, patting the dashboard affectionately. "Just a little further." The fuel gauge hovered dangerously close to empty, a fact that gnawed at the edges of her consciousness. She'd been scanning the horizon for any sign of civilization for the past hour, her anxiety growing with each mile, just as she was considering the very real possibility of being stranded in the middle of nowhere. She saw it, a faint glow in the distance, like a lighthouse in a sea of darkness. As she drew closer, the neon sign of a gas station emerged from the gloom, its buzzing tubes spelling out "Last Stop" in flickering red and blue. Melissa let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Thank God," she whispered, easing off the accelerator as she approached. The gas station looked like it had been plucked straight out of the 1950s and dropped into the present day. A handful of pumps stood sentinel in the forecourt, their rounded edges and faded paint speaking of decades of service. Behind them, a low-slung building housed what appeared to be a small convenience store, its windows glowing with a sickly fluorescent light. As Melissa pulled up to the nearest pump, she noticed a sign taped to the window of the store. "Help wanted, night cashier. $17 per hour, immediate hire." Her heart skipped a beat. She was broke, had been for most of this ill-advised cross-country trip. She'd set out from New York with dreams of making it big as a photographer in LA. But so far, all she had to show for it was an empty bank account and a car that was one bad pothole away from falling apart. $17 an hour, she mused, drumming her fingers on the steering wheel. It was more than she'd made at her last job, and God knew she needed the money. Plus, how hard could it be to work a cash register for a night? Decision made, Melissa killed the engine and stepped out into the warm Texas night. The air was thick and heavy, pressing down on her like a blanket. Not even a breeze stirred the dead air, and the sky above was a murky expanse of clouds, obscuring any hint of stars. As she approached the store, a flicker of unease passed through her. Something about this place felt off, but she shook her head, dismissing the thought. It was just nerves, just the fatigue of a long drive playing tricks on her mind. She needed this job. Everything else was just background noise. The bell above the door jangled discordantly as Melissa stepped into the store. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glare over shelves stocked with dusty packages of chips and candy bars that looked like they'd been there since the Carter administration. Behind the counter stood a man who looked as old and worn as the store itself. His face was a roadmap of wrinkles, eyes sunken deep into their sockets. The name tag pinned to his faded uniform shirt read Harvey, though the letters were so faded they were barely legible. "Evening," Melissa said, approaching the counter. I saw the sign about the night shift." Harvey's gaze slowly focused on her, as if he were peering through a fog. "You want the job?" His voice was a dry rasp, like sandpaper on wood. Melissa nodded, trying to project confidence she didn't quite feel. "Yeah, if it's still open. I've got experience in retail, and I'm a quick learner." Harvey didn't seem to register her words. He simply reached under the counter and produced a clipboard, sliding it across to her without a word. Melissa glanced down at the form. It was a standard employment application, though the paper felt oddly thick and yellowed, as if it had been sitting in that drawer for decades. She quickly filled it out, her pen scratching loudly in the quiet store. "Do you need to see my ID or anything?" she asked as she handed the clipboard back. Harvey shook his head, taking the clipboard and tucking it away without even glancing at it. He then pulled out a crumpled envelope from beneath the counter. It looked ancient, the edges yellowed and brittle. He slid it across the counter toward her. "For you," he muttered, his tone almost apologetic. Melissa frowned, picking up the envelope. "What's this?" But Harvey was already moving, shuffling toward the door with surprising speed for a man who had seemed so lethargic moments before. "Read it. Follow it," he called over his shoulder. "And whatever you do, lock the door at 3:36 a.m. Before Melissa could ask any more questions, Harvey was gone, swallowed up by the darkness beyond the store's windows. "Well, that was weird," Melissa muttered to herself, turning the envelope over in her hands. Part of her wanted to tear it open right away, but a larger part, the part that had gotten her through 4 years of art school and a year of scraping by in New York, told her to get to work first. She stashed the envelope in her bag and set about familiarizing herself with the store. The layout was simple enough. 4 aisles of snacks and basic groceries, a wall of refrigerated drinks, and a small section near the back that seemed to house automotive supplies and other road trip essentials. As she was examining the ancient cash register, trying to figure out how to ring up a sale, the bell above the door jangled again. Melissa looked up to see a burly trucker ambling in, his beard flecked with gray, and his eyes hidden behind mirrored sunglasses despite the late hour. "Evening," Melissa called out, remembering her customer service voice. "Let me know if you need any help finding anything." The trucker grunted in response, making his way to the drink coolers. As he browsed, Melissa couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching her, even though she couldn't see his eyes behind those glasses. She busied herself with straightening items on the counter, trying to ignore the prickle of unease crawling up her spine. Finally, the trucker approached the counter, placing a large coffee and a pack of beef jerky on the scratched surface. "This it?" Melissa asked, reaching for the items. The trucker nodded, then spoke in a voice like gravel. "You're new." It wasn't a question. Melissa forced a smile as she rang up the purchases. "Yeah, just started tonight. $12.55, please." As the trucker fished out his wallet, he leaned in slightly. "Word of advice, kid. Don't get too comfortable here. This stretch of road, it ain't like other places." Melissa's forced smile faltered. "What do you mean?" But the trucker was already turning away, grabbing his purchases. "Just keep your wits about you," he called over his shoulder as he headed for the door. "And whatever you do, follow the rules." The bell jangled again, and he was gone, leaving Melissa alone with a growing sense of unease and 1,000 questions she didn't know how to ask. With the store empty once more, Melissa's curiosity got the better of her. She pulled the envelope from her bag, turning it over in her hands. The paper felt odd, not quite like modern stock, more like the parchment she'd seen in museums. With a deep breath, she carefully opened it and pulled out a single folded sheet. As she unfolded it, her eyes widened. There, in neat, precise handwriting, were 9 rules. Rule 1. Do not make eye contact with customers wearing sunglasses, even at night. Rule 2. If you hear whistling, close the register drawer immediately and stand still until it stops. Rule 3. The bathroom door locks on its own after midnight. Do not attempt to enter after this time. Rule 4. If the phone rings between 2:10 a.m. and 2:17 a.m., do not answer it. Rule 5. At exactly 3:36 a.m., Lock the front door. Do not open it for any reason until 3:37 a.m. Rule 6. If a customer asks for directions to the other side, tell them the station is closed and direct them back to the highway. Rule 7. If the power goes out, shine your flashlight toward pump 6 until the lights return. Rule 8. If you hear something tapping on the back door, do not acknowledge it. Rule 9. When your shift ends, leave immediately. Do not take anything with you that you didn't bring in. Melissa read the rules twice, then a third time, her frown deepening with each pass. Some of them seemed almost comically specific. Who locks a door for exactly 1 minute, hinting at things she didn't want to contemplate. This has got to be a joke, she muttered, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her uncertainty. She'd heard of hazing rituals for new employees, but this felt different. There was an urgency to the rules, a seriousness that didn't fit with a simple prank. She glanced at her phone. It was just past 11:30 p.m. The night stretched out before her, long and dark and suddenly very, very strange. Melissa tucked the rules into her pocket, close at hand. Just in case, she told herself. It's probably nothing, but just in case. The bell above the door jangled, making her jump. A young couple walked in, laughing and leaning on each other. They were clearly drunk, their voices too loud in the quiet store. "Hey there," the guy called out, his words slightly slurred. "You got any condoms?" His girlfriend giggled, playfully slapping his arm. "Shut up, you idiot," she stage whispered. "Sorry about him," she said to Melissa. "We're just looking for some snacks." Melissa forced a smile, grateful for the distraction from her unsettling thoughts. "No problem. Snacks are in aisle 2. Let me know if you need anything else." As the couple stumbled toward the snack aisle, Melissa heard the guy mutter, "Man, this place is creepy as fuck. Let's hurry up and get out of here." She couldn't help but agree. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Melissa found herself checking the clock obsessively, each minute feeling like an eternity. The couple had left long ago, giggling their way into the night, and since then, the store had been oppressively quiet. To pass the time, Melissa tried to strike up conversations with the few customers who wandered in. Most were truckers, bleary-eyed and taciturn, interested only in caffeine and a quick bathroom break. One, a middle-aged woman with hair dyed an improbable shade of red, lingered a bit longer. She leaned on the counter, coffee in hand, and fixed Melissa with a piercing stare. "You're new here, aren't you, honey?" she asked, her voice husky from years of cigarettes. Melissa nodded. "Yeah, just started tonight. Is it that obvious?" The woman chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "Oh, sweetie, everyone's new here at some point. It's just that most don't stay new for long." "What do you mean?" The woman took a long sip of her coffee, her eyes never leaving Melissa's face. "This stretch of road, it's not like other places. Things happen here that don't make sense. You'll see." Before Melissa could press for more information, the woman straightened up. "Well, I'd better get back on the road. Take care of yourself, honey. And remember, the rules are there for a reason." With that cryptic statement, she was gone, leaving Melissa alone with her thoughts and a growing sense of unease. As the night wore on, Melissa found herself jumping at every little sound. The hum of the refrigerators, the buzz of the fluorescent lights, even the occasional gust of wind outside, all seemed to take on a sinister quality in the oppressive silence of the store. She tried to distract herself by tidying up, straightening products on shelves and wiping down counters. But no matter how busy she kept her hands, Her mind kept drifting back to those 9 rules. At 11:55 p.m., Melissa found herself standing in front of the bathroom door, hand hovering over the knob. Rule number 3 echoed in her mind. The bathroom door locks on its own after midnight. Do not attempt to enter after this time. This is ridiculous, she muttered to herself. It's just a bathroom. But as the ancient clock on the wall ticked closer to midnight, she couldn't bring herself to open the door. What if it really did lock? What if something was waiting inside? The second hand swept past 12, and Melissa could have sworn she heard a faint click from the bathroom door. She yanked her hand back as if burned, heart pounding in her chest. It's fine, she told herself, voice shaky. You're just tired. You're letting your imagination run wild. But as she turned away from the bathroom, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her from behind that closed door. It was just after 1 a.m. when Melissa heard it. A soft, tuneless whistle, drifting through the store like a ghost. Her blood ran cold as she remembered rule number 2. If you hear whistling, close the register drawer immediately and stand still until it stops. For a moment, she was frozen, her mind refusing to process what was happening. But as the whistling grew louder, instinct took over. She slammed the register drawer shut with trembling hands and stood perfectly still, barely daring to breathe. The whistling seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. It circled the store, growing louder and then softer, as if whatever was making the sound was pacing the aisles. Melissa's heart pounded so hard, she was sure it would burst from her chest. Just when she thought she couldn't take it anymore, the whistling stopped as abruptly as it had begun. The sudden silence was almost worse, pressing down on her ears like a physical weight. Melissa remained still for several more minutes, afraid to move, afraid to even blink. Finally, when it became clear that the whistling wasn't going to resume, she let out a shaky breath. "What the fuck was that?" she whispered to herself, her voice sounding unnaturally loud in the quiet store. She wanted to laugh it off, to tell herself it was just the wind or her imagination playing tricks on her. But deep down, she knew better. Something had been in the store with her, something that wasn't supposed to be there. As she tried to calm her racing heart, Melissa's eyes fell on the envelope containing the rules. For the first time, she began to truly believe that they might be more than just a prank or a hazing ritual. She pulled out her phone, desperate for some connection to the outside world. But the no service message mocked her from the screen. She was alone here, truly alone, with only those 9 rules to guide her through the night. The next hour passed in tense silence. Melissa jumped at every little noise, her nerves stretched to the breaking point. She found herself constantly checking the rules, committing them to memory as if her life depended on it. At 2:09 a.m., the ancient rotary phone on the wall began to ring. Melissa froze, her eyes darting to the clock. Rule number 4 echoed in her mind. If the phone rings between 2:10 a.m. and 2:17 a.m., do not answer it. The shrill ring cut through the silence like a knife, making her flinch. She stared at the phone, her hands itching to pick it up, if only to make the noise stop. But the rule was clear. 1 minute passed, then 2. The phone kept ringing, an endless, maddening drone. Melissa covered her ears, but it did little to muffle the sound. She paced behind the counter, counting the seconds, praying for 2:17 to come quickly. Just when she thought she couldn't take it anymore, the ringing stopped. The sudden silence was almost as jarring as the noise had been. Melissa uncovered her ears slowly, listening intently. For a moment, she thought she heard something, a soft, raspy breathing, as if someone was on the other end of the line, waiting. But when she turned to look at the phone, the receiver was still in its cradle, undisturbed. Melissa shuddered, wrapping her arms around herself. The air in the store suddenly felt colder, and she could have sworn she saw her breath mist in front of her face for just a second. "Get it together, Mel," she muttered to herself, rubbing her arms to ward off the chill. "It's just an old building, probably drafty as hell." But even as she said it, she knew she was lying to herself. Something was very wrong here, and those rules were the only thing standing between her and whatever it was that lurked in the shadows of this godforsaken gas station. As 3:36 a.m. approached, Melissa found herself pacing nervously behind the counter. Rule number 5 loomed large in her mind. At exactly 3:36 a.m., lock the front door. Do not open it for any reason until 3:37 a.m. She'd spent the last hour debating whether or not to follow this rule. It seemed ridiculous, arbitrary. What difference could 1 minute make? But after the whistling and the phone call, she wasn't taking any chances. At 3:35, she moved to the front door, her hand hovering over the lock. The night outside was pitch black, the clouds still obscuring any hint of stars or moon. She peered out into the darkness, half expecting to see something or someone waiting just beyond the pool of light cast by the store's neon signs. The ancient clock on the wall ticked loudly, counting down the seconds. Melissa's palms were sweaty, her heart racing. As the second hand swept past 12, she turned the lock with a decisive click. For a moment, nothing happened. Melissa let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Maybe this rule was just paranoia after all. Then she saw it, moving through the darkness towards the store. It was tall, impossibly tall, its proportions all wrong for a human. It moved with a jerky, unnatural gait, as if its limbs were being controlled by strings. Melissa stumbled backwards, her back hitting the counter. She wanted to scream, but her voice was stuck in her throat. The figure reached the edge of the light, cast by the store's windows, and for a split second, Melissa caught a glimpse of its face, or rather, where its face should have been. There was nothing there, just a smooth, featureless expanse of skin. The thing raised a hand, too long, too thin, and placed it against the glass of the door. Melissa could hear a sound now, a high-pitched keening that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. She squeezed her eyes shut, pressing her hands over her ears. "This isn't happening. This isn't real. This isn't happening." The keening grew louder, building to a crescendo that Melissa felt in her bones. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. Melissa opened her eyes. The figure was gone. The night outside was still and empty, as if nothing had happened. She glanced at the clock. 3:37 a.m. With shaking hands, she unlocked the door. Part of her expected something to come bursting in the moment she turned the lock. But nothing happened. The store remained quiet, the only sound the faint buzzing of the fluorescent lights and her own ragged breathing. Melissa slumped against the counter, her legs suddenly too weak to support her. What the hell had she gotten herself into? Melissa jumped at every sound, every shadow. She found herself constantly checking and rechecking the rules, as if they might have changed when she wasn't looking. As dawn approached, she began to feel a glimmer of hope. She'd made it through the night. Soon, her replacement would arrive, and she could leave this nightmare behind. The bell above the door jangled, making Melissa start. She looked up to see a man enter the store. He was unremarkable in every way. Average height, average build, brown hair, brown eyes. But something about him made Melissa's skin crawl. He approached the counter, his movements smooth and purposeful. When he spoke, his voice was soft and oddly melodic. "Excuse me," he said, smiling in a way that didn't reach his eyes. "I was wondering if you could give me directions." Melissa forced a smile, her customer service instincts kicking in despite her unease. "Sure. Where are you headed?" The man's smile widened, showing too many teeth. "I'm looking for the other side." Melissa felt her blood run cold. Rule number 6 echoed in her mind. If a customer asks for directions to the other side, tell them the station is closed and direct them back to the highway. She swallowed hard, her mouth suddenly dry. "I'm sorry, sir, but the station is closed. You'll need to head back to the highway." The man's smile didn't falter, but his eyes... God, his eyes. They seemed to darken, to deepen, becoming bottomless pits that threatened to swallow Melissa whole. "Are you sure about that?" he asked, his voice taking on a strange, echoing quality. "I could have sworn this was the place. The doorway to the other side." Melissa gripped the edge of the counter, her knuckles turning white. "I'm sure, sir. The highway is that way." She pointed, her arm shaking slightly. For a long moment, the man just stared at her. Melissa felt like a bug under a microscope, being examined and found wanting. Then, abruptly, he turned away. "My mistake," he said, his voice normal once more. "I'll just be on my way then." As he reached the door, he paused and looked back. "Take care, Melissa," he said, his smile now sad and knowing. "The night's not over yet." Before Melissa could respond, could ask how he knew her name, he was gone, swallowed up by the pre-dawn darkness. Melissa sagged against the counter, her legs threatening to give out. She glanced at the clock. 5:45 a.m. Just 15 more minutes until her shift ended. She could make it. She had to make it. At precisely 6 a.m., the bell above the door jangled once more. Melissa looked up, hope and fear warring in her chest. Her replacement had arrived, a man with hollow eyes and a haunted expression. He looked a lot like Harvey, though Melissa couldn't be sure. There was something off about him, like looking at a photo that's slightly out of focus. He approached the counter without a word, reaching into his pocket. Melissa tensed, half expecting him to pull out a weapon. Instead, he produced an envelope identical to the one she'd received at the start of her shift. "For the next, Melissa," he said, his voice low and tired. Melissa blinked, confusion momentarily overriding her fear. "What do you mean, the next Melissa? I'm Melissa." The man just stared at her with that strange, empty expression. "Are you sure about that?" She opened her mouth to argue, to insist that yes, of course, she was sure, but the words died in her throat. Because suddenly, she wasn't sure. Who was she? Why was she here? The man, her replacement, didn't wait for an answer. He simply moved behind the counter, as if Melissa wasn't even there. Shaken, Melissa grabbed her bag and headed for the door. As her hand touched the handle, she remembered the last rule. When your shift ends, leave immediately. Do not take anything with you that you didn't bring in. She paused, her hand hovering over her bag. Had she put anything in there during her shift? She couldn't remember. Everything felt hazy, dreamlike. Better safe than sorry, she decided, leaving the bag behind. She'd come back for it later. Maybe. As Melissa stepped outside, she was struck by how wrong everything looked. The sky was still a dull, sickly gray, with no hint of the dawn that should have broken by now. The air was thick and heavy, pressing down on her like a physical weight. She walked to her car, each step feeling like she was wading through molasses. As she reached for the door handle, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the window. It wasn't her face staring back. Melissa, or whoever she was, scrambled into the car, her heart pounding. She started the engine and peeled out of the parking lot, gravel spraying behind her tires. But as she drove down Route 66, the uneasy feeling only grew. She glanced in the rearview mirror, and her stomach dropped. The gas station was still there, sitting just behind her, no matter how far she drove. Her phone buzzed in the cup holder. With trembling hands, she picked it up. The message was short, cold. Shift not yet complete. Return immediately. Melissa's laugh died in her throat as she realized she wasn't alone in the car. Something shifted in the passenger seat, heavy and wrong. She refused to look at it, her hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. The air grew thick with the scent of gasoline and something sour, like rotting fruit. The thing beside her leaned in close, its breath hot and rancid against her neck. "You forgot one of the rules," it whispered. Melissa slammed on the brakes, the car skidding to a halt on the empty highway. Slowly, dreading what she might see, she turned to confront the thing in the passenger seat. But there was nothing there. Just her own reflection in the window. Except it wasn't her. It was the man from the gas station, wearing her face. In that moment, Melissa understood the truth. She wasn't Melissa. She never had been. The gas station had already taken her, twisting her memories, feeding on her identity. And now, she was part of it. Melissa turned the car around, her hands steady on the wheel. The gas station welcomed her like an old friend, its neon signs cutting through the eternal twilight of Route 66. As she parked and walked back into the store, she felt a sense of rightness, of coming home. She moved behind the counter, smiling as the bell jangled, announcing a new customer. A young woman entered, looking tired and desperate. "Hi," she said, her voice uncertain. "I saw the sign about the night shift. Is it still available?" Melissa's smile widened. She reached under the counter and pulled out the envelope of rules. "Welcome," she said, sliding the envelope across the counter. "We've been waiting for you." The gas station shifted inside her, hungry for the next victim. And so, the cycle would begin again. As it always had. As it always would. On this lonely stretch of Route 66, where the night never truly ends.